spin here at Success Council by the tremendous response from our last video on the Audit the Fed. I think that video is waking people faster than any other video we've made. Today, we're going to have some fun. Later on, if you like, you can take a quiz and compare yourself politically to Gandhi, Obama, Romney, Stalin, Mao, Ron Paul, and many others. Although, I warn you, you might not like the results you get. Now, you probably think that after this test, we'll tell you where you are on the left-right political spectrum you fall. Well, we're not going to do that because I think the left-right political spectrum makes no sense whatsoever. In fact, the reason left versus right is perpetuated in the media and through the education system is that it hinders political discussion on real topics. I mean, think about it. We're told that on the far left you have totalitarian communism, and on the far right you have totalitarian fascism. In the middle, we have moderates. Moderates, meaning moderate forms of two different types of totalitarianism? There's no such thing. And tell me, where in this spectrum does liberty fit in? Where would an anarchist go? Where would the USA's founding fathers fit? I bet they would not be caught dead on that spectrum. So in order to have a meaningful debate, we need to define a new spectrum that actually means something. The only one that makes any sense to me is the one offered by G. Edward Griffin. On one side of the spectrum, you have 100% authoritarian. On the other, you have no state at all. Anarchy. The more you're in favor of the government using their coercive lawmaking powers, the more you move to authoritarian. The more you're in favor of letting individuals voluntarily solve their own problems, the more you move toward the anarchist side of the spectrum. Now we have a spectrum that actually means something. But there is one more addition we can add that will make this spectrum far more useful. This idea is offered by www.politicalcompass.org. They suggest that generally, political conversations fall into one of two categories, social and economic. To make the spectrum even more useful, they suggest creating a political compass, with the horizontal axis representing economic issues and the vertical axis representing social ones. The top of the compass represents when government has complete power over social issues. The left of the compass represents when the government has complete power over the economy. Likewise, the bottom and right of the compass represents when individuals have complete power and the state has none. I think the best way to explain this is to run through a few examples. Let's take the stereotypical view of the U.S. Republican Party. With regard to the economy, they're known as fiscal conservatives. Compared to the Democrats, at least, they say government is bad at managing the economy. Therefore, taxes should be low and bureaucracy small. That pushes them to the right half of the compass. What about social issues? Well, paradoxically, they think government is brilliant at telling people who they can marry, what they can smoke, what drugs they can ingest, and so on. They even think they have the right to use their military to tell other countries what form of government they should have. All of these things tell us that Republicans are far more authoritarian on their social issues than their economic ones. So that puts them in the top half of the spectrum. Therefore, we see Republicans are in the right-hand upper corner of the political compass. What about Democrats? Well, they say government has no business telling people who to marry, what drugs they take, or what sexual orientation they should be. They think the government is terrible at making decisions for us on how to live and therefore should not. And the government especially has no right to tell other people around the world how they should live. So naturally, Democrats will be more anti-war than the Republicans. This puts Democrats on the bottom half of the compass. They enjoy their social liberty. What about economically? Well, this is a different story entirely. They might say people are greedy, selfish, and don't know how to share. And most people don't know how to take care of themselves economically. What if people get sick and die? Government needs to take control of the economy and these people through high taxes collected from the selfish and greedy people. Well, this puts them on the left-hand side of the compass. So Democrats are traditionally known to be in the bottom left-hand side. What about the ever-increasingly popular libertarian movement? Well, finally, we have a little bit of congruency at least. They say government is terrible at both. On the social spectrum, when it comes to spreading their ideologies around the globe, they believe in the power of good example and persuasion, not military force. This applies equally to what you can eat, what drugs you choose to take, who you can marry, and what your sexual orientation is. Libertarians say no government has the right to interfere in your life, and government power usually yields an undesirable outcome. They are in the bottom half of the compass. And how about economically? They believe in free market principles. Libertarians say the government has no right to steal your property no matter how noble the cause may be. Their reason is because once that right is granted, it will get corrupted and used by the wealthy to steal from the poor and middle classes. Libertarians are on the right half of the compass, so they are in the bottom right quadrant. In both cases, they think the individual has the right of freedom of choice. They think people should be treated like adults and make their own decisions. So who lives up here in the top left-hand quadrant? Well, in the extreme, these are the megalomaniac, power-hungry tyrants of the world. Totalitarianism. They believe the government is the solution to all problems we face. Exactly opposite to libertarians. They think the group is more important than the individual. At the social extreme, they may act like Hitler and choose to exterminate homosexuals, invalids, and Jews for the betterment of the group. They may favor a particular hair and eye color. Like Chinese authorities, they may limit your ability to have children for the sake of the group. Economically, like Stalin, they may take ownership and control of every resource in the country. They control the value and price of money. They tell people where to work, for what hours, and for what pay, if any at all. To make things more efficient for them to rule, they believe in a one-world government. Of course, they generally only like this form of government when they are in power at the top. Although they claim to do this so that everyone gets their fair share, some people's share is inevitably fairer than others. So, okay, I think you have a pretty good idea of how the political compass works. Armed with this tool, let me share my thoughts on how the political system works in America and indeed most of the world. I believe that the ruling class or politicians in this world are generally tyrants from the totalitarian quadrant. They lie and say the things someone in the Republican or Democrat quadrant would say, but they only do half of what they say, the half that is congruent with tyranny. The half that is congruent with liberty is ignored once they take office. For example,
I will promise you this, that if we have not gotten our troops out by the time I am president, it is the first thing I will do. I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war. You can take that to the bank.
That is certainly something we would expect a Democrat to believe in. But he made no attempt whatsoever to do it. In fact, he expanded the military presence of the U.S. overseas. But the welfare programs like Obamacare he promised, which were congruent with totalitarianism, he delivered. What about Bush? Any difference?
But I think one way for us to end up being viewed as the ugly American is for us to go around the world saying, we do it this way, so should you. If we don't stop extending our troops all around the world in nation-building missions, then we're going to have a serious problem coming down the road, and I'm going to prevent that.
I'm concerned that we're over-deployed around the world.
I don't want to be the world's policeman. I want to be the world's peacemaker.
Your question was deployment. The force must be strong enough so that the mission can be accomplished, and the exit strategy needs to be well-defined.
So there, he wins over the crowd with talk of humble foreign policy and peace. That's not exactly what comes to mind when I think about his presidency. He knew full well there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But he went in nation building anyway. And 10 years later, there's still no exit strategy defined. Why? Because he's just a tyrant in sheep's clothing. What about the two of them working together as a team to advance tyranny?
Let me just explain for those who are unfamiliar with this issue. We've got a government designed by the founders so that there'd be checks and balances. You don't want a president who's too powerful, or a Congress who's too powerful, or a courts who's too powerful. Everybody's got their own role. Congress's job is to pass legislation. The president can veto it, or he can sign it. But what George Bush has been trying to do as part of his effort to accumulate more power in the presidency is he's been saying, well, I can basically change what Congress passed by attaching a letter saying, I don't agree with this part or I don't agree with that part. I'm going to choose to interpret it this way or that way. That's not part of his power. But this is part of the whole theory of George Bush, that he can make laws as he's going along. I disagree with that. I taught the Constitution for 10 years. I believe in the Constitution, and I will obey the Constitution of the United States. We're not going to use signing statements as a way of doing an end run around Congress. All right?
That was his election promise. Less than 2 months after his inauguration, Obama is using signing statements. He confessed to the crime just months before committing the crime. Why? Because Obama, Bush, Romney, and Clinton are all teammates. Their jerseys all say totalitarianism. But you might ask, if they are the same team, why are some jerseys blue and some jerseys red? There are two primary reasons for that. One, they need to give you the illusion of choice. If you realize that you were controlled by a tyrannical force and not really free at all, you might protest, strike, and otherwise be a difficult subject for your master. And two, creating the illusion of choice keeps you voting. And voting for one of the two tyrants gives sanction to their behavior. How can you get angry at the politician when the things he promised you backfire? Either you voted for him or your fellow citizen did. We seem to forget the fact that he only did the things that marched the country to totalitarianism and ignored his promises to move the country to freedom. Eventually, after 4 or 8 years of them, enough of us want to change. We start to dislike them and their red or blue jerseys' ways. So we vote for the other color looking forward to real change. As long as we vote for red or blue, though, there will be no change. Either way, the totalitarian team always wins. So am I telling you something you don't know? Well, a Rasmussen poll recently asked the question, when looking at a choice between Obama and Romney, is it a choice you're excited about, or will you simply be voting for the lesser of two evils? The results, 45% are excited, and 46% consider it the lesser of two evils. This means more people have figured it out than not. So why do the red and blue jerseys get over 80% of the vote? Or a better question, why does the totalitarian party get over 80% of the vote? Most people's response to this question is, well, what are you going to do? Not vote at all? Of course, not voting is better than sanctioning evil. If you were in a room with two innocent children and I had a gun with one bullet and asked which one should I shoot, would you pick one or choose none? Choosing none is better than sanctioning evil. Now, while voting for either Romney or Obama is worse than not voting at all, that is not what I'm suggesting. The ultimate solution must be to vote for someone who has advanced the cause of liberty and not totalitarianism. But I warn you, look at their deeds and not what they say. That's why I suggest Americans write in Ron Paul's name when they vote. And for the Brits out there, I suggest Nigel Farage. Now, I know a lot of you just had a media-induced Pavlovian response kick in. A voice in your head saying, but voting for them is a wasted vote. Remind yourself that wasting your vote is better than sanctioning evil, and voting for a libertarian is better than doing nothing. So get some guts and be a leader instead of a follower. If you display courage, others will follow. Even if a libertarian doesn't win the election, more freedom fighters will be encouraged to vote that way too in the next election. Okay, we've kind of run out of time here. I promised you we would do a test so you can compare yourself to Romney, Obama, Gandhi, etc. I'm going to have to do that in the next video. After you like and share this video, head over to successcouncil.com for more great videos. See you soon.
I wanted to draw a picture for listeners out there, a very simple, crude picture that describes effectively the false left-right paradigm. The Republican Party props up the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party props up the Republican Party. If you had one of the political parties standing on its own, when the wind came along, it would just fall over. When pressure, revolutionary pressure from the population not liking what's going on, or new groups wanting the power structure, which is the main source of revolution, most of it is driven by evil, just like the elite is driven by evil. Very rare to have an altruistic revolution. By itself, a single-party system will fall over. Okay? But if you take the two-party systems and you lean them up against each other, this is basically the arch. Their force going together keeps them together and makes it become a very strong, stable platform on which they can build their hierarchical New World Order system. Okay? So the current two-party system has been dominated and bought up and controlled by the elite that sits atop it. Now, the elite with a one-party system would not be balanced on top of one party. They would be subject to being toppled, being pushed over easily. But You put the two parties up against each other, they form a royal arch. And now it's very hard to separate those two because they're leaning up against each other. I mean, this is really simple, but I want to explain this to people. Check it out, folks. Why do you see so many leftists who mean well, like Rage Against the Machine, Tom Morello, or Henry Rollins, who are right on so many issues but then believe in leftist policies? We need a global carbon tax. But there's an elite funding that. No, the elite, the big corporations are against it because the media advertises that big corporations and oil companies are against it. Henry Rollins doesn't know, doesn't have the documents. It doesn't understand that actually that's part of a sophisticated game that, the big corporations say publicly, we don't want this, it's bad, while they actually fund it. They know the public's awake to the fact that they're corrupt, so the public will be fooled and go and support the agenda. It's please don't throw me in the briar patch. It's the old briar rabbit situation. Here's the political field, and this is where the population resides. And then we supposedly, through the grassroots, come up into the political party. Okay? And then they lean on each other, as I was saying earlier, and support each other. If they're standing alone, the pressure of revolution or of new power structures will easily topple it and blow it over. But leaning together, it's not going to fall down. Okay? Now, I know that's simple, but let me give you an everyday example of this. As I said, the left sees all of these evil mainline Republicans who we know are liars and who the media even exposes as being liars. They see them lying about everything else. So if the Republicans come out and say, we're against a global carbon tax, well, then by God, I'm for a global carbon tax. And so that's how the two sides leaning up against each other give the other side support. And so Democrats over here, Republicans over here, Republicans attack Barack Obama. And then the Democrats attack John McCain. And then the population who's down here is trained to see John McCain as representing them personally, as being their daddy, of where their personal power comes from, of their camp, their brand name, their brand of soda, their brand of automobile, Ford or Chevy. And so this is a controlled paradigm. And so we have Republicans attacking Democrats, and that's the force against them. And you have Democrats attacking Republicans, and that's the force against them. And really, it's one unit supporting themselves and containing revolution, so that the people who were down here never learned that there is a world outside of this controlled paradigm. We are locked within the left-right paradigm. And then it becomes this huge pageant, this huge distraction where we analyze every facet of the two political parties, never realizing they themselves are simply a front or puppets for a larger power structure. Now, this is incredibly simple, but that's how this works. And then the two parties can limit the issues that are debated to this controlled paradigm. They can limit the scope of differences, which, if you look at it, there's almost no difference between the two, instead of getting the people to look outside the box at the wider world.
Mr. Curtis, would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Clinton Eugene Curtis.
And where do you reside?
Tallahassee, Florida.
And what is your profession?
I'm a computer programmer.
Would you please speak into the microphone so the audience can hear your testimony?
I'm a computer programmer.
Mr. Curtis, are there programs that can be used to secretly fix elections?
Yes.
How do you know that to be the case?
Because in October of 2000, I wrote a prototype for President Congressman Tom Feeney at the company I work for in Oviedo, Florida, that did just that.
And when you say did just that, it would rig an election?
It would flip the vote 51-49 to whoever you wanted it to go to and whichever race you wanted to win.
And would that program that you designed be something that elections officials that might be on county boards of elections could detect?
They'd never see it.
Mr. Would you answer that question once again?
They would never see it.
So how would such a program, a secret program that fixes the election, how could it be detected?
You would have to view it either in the source code, or you'd have to have a receipt and then count the hard paper against the actual vote total. Other than that, you won't see it.
All right, Mr. Curtis, if you had been asked, you or others with your professional expertise had been asked to design a protective program that would protect the Ohio elections from against such software to fix the election, could you have done so?
If we've been asked to make a program that can fix the election, sure, anybody can do it.
No, could you have designed a program or a procedure or a protocol that would have protected Ohio against this kind of rigging?
No, you have to look at the source code. You have to get probably programmers from both or all parties to look at the source code and determine if there's anything in there that shouldn't be there. I mean, it's a simple program. You're adding 1 to a person's total. It's 100 lines of code tops.
All right. Are you aware of whether there was any protective action in Ohio against this kind of vote rigging through software?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
You were not asked to assist in the development of any protective system. Is that correct?
No, I was not.
In Europe, have you reviewed at all the election results in Ohio?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Given the availability of such vote rigging software and the testimony that has been given under oath of substantial statistical anomalies and gross differences between exit polling data and the actual tabulated results, do you have an opinion whether or not the Ohio election, presidential election, was hacked?
Yes, I would say it was. I mean, if you have exit polling data that is significantly off from the vote, then it's probably hacked.
And your testimony is under oath?
Yes, sir.
And the testimony you've given is true?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Congresswoman Waters and I have the same question.
Come back to the podium.
Who did you say you were asked to prepare?
I was asked by Tom Feeney. He's now a congressman. At that time, he was Speaker of the House of Florida, Yang Enterprises, which was the company I worked for, lobbyist, and their corporate attorney. Wore a lot of hats.
And at the time, he was the Speaker of the House of Florida. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Congressman.
You say he was the lobbyist for the voting machine company at the same time he was Speaker of the House?
I don't know what the voting machine company is. He was a lobbyist for Yang Enterprises. We had NASA contracts and
Yang Enterprises did what? Computers?
Computers.
Okay, and he was your lobbyist. Your company's
the lobbyist for that company, yes.
And he asked you to design a code to rig an election.
Yes.
While he was Speaker of the Florida House.
Yes.
This was during or previous to the 2000 election?
Yes, October into September.
And did he ever express why he wanted a code to rig an election?
No, I immediately assumed that they were trying to keep you guys from cheating them. So, so I wrote up the documentation on what you would look for in the source code, how you would make sure that you didn't get, taken advantage of, make sure that all voting machines had receipts, because that way you could back count the ones that looked a little funny. And I handed it
By receipts, you mean a paper trail?
Yes, paper trail. And I handed that in to Mrs. Yang and said, here's your report, here's your program. And she said, you don't understand, we need to hide the fraud in the source code.
Hide the fraud, not reveal the fraud.
Not reveal the fraud, because it's needed to control the vote in South Florida, was what she said.
That's what she said. To your knowledge, was this used?
I have no idea. I was ready to leave, so I retired and left the company.
Your testimony a moment ago, I think you said just before you left, in answer to the Congresswoman Tubby Jones' question, would you just repeat what you said in terms of the exit polls?
Oh, the exit polls should not be significantly different than the vote.
And if they were, you would conclude what?
I would conclude someone's playing with a vote.
Now with the exit polls?
That's possible too.
Okay, I was going to ask why
something is definitely skewed.
Something is skewed in one or the other or both.
Right. To select which one, you'd have to see where the problem is.
Let me ask you one further question. Assuming for the moment that such software, that's what you call it, such software to rig a vote was used in one or more machines in Ohio or in Florida, could you today detect that if you looked at the source code?
If you could get the machines and they have not been patched yet, I mean, once they get in and touch them, anything can happen. You can also set timers to do that, but then you see the timers. Then you'd have to take those machines, decompile them, which I couldn't do, but possibly a Microsoft, an MIT, something could do. You might be able to see it.
You might.
Not necessarily. Depends on how good they are at destroying what they had.
Destroying what they had by tampering with the machine afterwards, or by programming a destroy instruction in the first place?
Right, because since you didn't...
Either or both?
Either or both. You didn't actually see what's in there, so you don't know if the code is running in a single executable or running in various modules. If it's running in modules, you can make the code actually eat itself.
Let me ask you one further question. I've been told that people who assume that lots of the election results, or that a large fraction of the election result in any state may have been affected by deliberate fraud in the computer, are paranoid because in order to do that, you have to have access to thousands of machines, and that would be readily detectable. To what extent is that true?
It depends on the technology you use. If you did a central tabulation machine that fed in, all you'd have to do is set a flag. You set a flag, the central tabulation machine would then flip your vote.
So one person putting in bad code in a central tabulation machine could affect thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of votes.
Right, and you could activate either automatically, or you could make it so that there's code existing on like an electronic machine that feeds it, where you would punch it in, it would set the flag, the server would see the flag, and then...
And if you had a recount, and there were no paper trail, would that be, assuming that had happened, would that be revealable by seeing a discrepancy between what the central tabulator showed and what the individual machines, which had not been tampered with, showed?
Not if I wrote it.
Why not? In other words,
I would make it match.
You could work back from the tabulator to the individual machines, so the tabulator would tell the machines to switch their results?
Yes, it talks both ways. You can flip it to whatever you need.
And they actually do talk to each other, the machines and the tabulator.
As long as it's networked together, they can talk to each other.
So in other words, there's absolutely no assurance whatsoever on anything with regard to these machines?
Absolutely none, unless you look at the source code and make sure it's safe before it goes in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Mathers. I know that Congresswoman Waters has a question, and then Senator Miller, and then Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs-Jones.
This will only take a moment if you would come back to the...
I'm new at this.
As you know, there has been a lot of discussion about, I think it was Diebold company, their relationship to the president and the administration, and supposedly comments about helping to ensure that the president was reelected. In your world, in your environment, have you heard any of this kind of discussion? Do you know people who vote for Diebold? Do you have any sense of any actions that may have been taken?
I don't know anything about that at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, I suspect people will attack you in terms of your credibility. Could you restate once again your credentials?
I'm a programmer. I worked for NASA, worked for ExxonMobil, worked for Florida Department of Transportation, and other elements of my story, because this company, well, let's get into it. Why not? This company also, they have NASA contracts, and they were basically downloading tons of information, I mean gigabytes worth, and handing them off to this little Chinese guy named Henry Nee. And it didn't seem right. And he was hacking things, and I wrote a program for DOT that allowed contractors to send their information into DOT, and he was kind of the quality assurance guy for software. He put a wiretapping module in the program that went out to the contractors so that it actually sent everything they sent back to Yang. So I reported all this, and just last March, I think, he was arrested for attempting to send anti-tank missile chips to the capital of Communist China. So, if that's correct, this is such a small thing. Of course, I think he only got a $100 fine. And no time.
Thank you. Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are now going to back to the public testimony.